Rightio, today we're going to be chatting about the Mizuno Wave Rider 29, which is a nice, simple, stable, safe daily trainer, which I've been using over the past couple of weeks now. Had a lot of experience with this one in store as well, so I want to chat you through my thoughts top to bottom, chat about the price, get into a few comparisons as well, because although this isn't the kind of headline, top line performance trainer, I do think there is still a position for something like this on the current running shoe market. Starting off with some specs, we've got 38.5mm of foam in the heel, 10mm drop down to 28.5 in the forefoot. They're using their Mizuno NXT foam, which in this case is a supercritical nitrogen infused EVA foam. It's plush, I would say. It feels quite similar to Puma's Nitro foam, the older versions, which were a Nitro EVA. It's got a little bit of squish, a little bit of bounce back, but it's not exactly a super foam by any stretch. We do have the wave plate here, which I think has been incorporated in a more kind of subtle way, I would say. You can see it kind of stretching through the back end of the midfoot into the heel. That's going to be acting as a bit of a kind of stiffening agent, giving the heel a little bit more structure, preventing overcompression of the EVA foam. In terms of weight, we're coming through at 288 grams in my men's size 10.5, which is decent. It's not super light, but for anything to be around about 290 grams and under, I'm pretty happy with for the daily training zone. If it's above that, I am starting to ask questions, so this is kind of right on the edge. The upper here is quite simple. We've got a pretty structured heel counter, a little bit of padding running around to the ankle collar, fairly flexible tongue, no lace loop there, but it is gusseted on both sides, sits over the top of the foot quite comfortably, fair bit of padding all the way down as well. The upper mesh is moderately breathable. It's not the airiest that I've come across, doesn't have a heap of stretch to it, so in the kind of midfoot and heel section, the lockdown is quite secure and a lot of stretch to it, but getting up into the toe box, things open up and we have what I would call quite a high volume fit. I would suggest this could work for slightly wider footers. I've had a few people in store who would sometimes wear a 2E, find this to be just fine. You do definitely have just that little bit of extra height and a bit of extra kind of upper material running through the forefoot there. In terms of sizing, I've gone true to size 10.5. I reckon I probably could have got away with a size 10 with a strong ankle lockdown, but I would say for most people, true to size is the way to go, unless you are, not a fan of having any extra wiggle room ahead of your big toe. Overall, I think the upper here is simple. It's doing its job. Bit of extra volume will help a few more people get into this shoe. This is pretty much exactly what I need for most daily trainers in terms of that sizing, in terms of a bit of extra volume up in the forefoot. In terms of the ride here underfoot, with a whole new NXT foam underfoot, a little bit more of a modern take on the wave plate, we're looking at a ride which feels a lot more friendly, if not a little bit fun. The EVA foam here is definitely not a super foam, but it does have a nice healthy plush rebound, a little bit of pop back, especially when you get up into the forefoot and you can compress down. Landing through the heel, it is definitely a little bit firmer, a little bit more structured and stable, and it does give you this kind of, pitching forward feeling where there is a bit of a different density in the compression between the heel and the forefoot. For me, landing mostly through the kind of front half of the shoe, I didn't really notice the wave plate a whole lot until I was sitting back on some of my daily training runs when I was feeling a little bit tired, and I did definitely notice there the difference between the heel and forefoot, which gave you this kind of, pitching forward sensation where you didn't get quite as deep into the heel, but then you could kind of sink through the forefoot and get quite a nice transition, even if the forefoot isn't super rocketed. This is quite a stable shoe as well. The foam is not overly soft. We have a decent level of surface area underfoot, not a lot of rockering as well, so it is just quite simple and straightforward. I think that this is going to be a shoe which a lot of people can get around, even if they have some kind of minor stability needs. For me, this is a shoe I can pretty happily chuck on for 40 to 60 minutes of easy running. I've been using it for my warm-ups and cool-downs before sessions as well, which I find to be quite useful. It's just simple, straightforward. It does require a little bit of extra work through the calf just to keep things ticking over, but it does have that kind of simplicity which I have enjoyed. The foam isn't harsh, the geometry isn't harsh, it just comes across as that kind of balanced ride which we don't really see anymore. Everything's a kind of extreme. It's either extremely soft or extremely rocketed, very bouncy. Everything's just trying to grab your attention. This just feels a little bit more subtle and a little bit more straightforward. In store, I've had a fair bit of success with this one as well, bringing it out alongside other daily training recommendations. I would say if someone's come in and they don't know exactly what they want, first real pair of running shoes, this is one that I always bring out because it does feel a little bit more safe and a little bit more familiar, probably a little bit closer to what most people have been using in the past couple of years, like a gel Kayano 28 or 29 before it underwent that huge revolution. This just feels a little bit more normal, a little bit more natural feeling. I also bring it out alongside shoes like the Evo SL, Nova Blast and the Rebel, because each of those shoes does have their own kind of, not issue, but they have their own little quirks. You know, Evo SL with the midfoot cutout, which you can collapse through. Nova Blast with a really soft, mushy foam. Same for the Rebel. It just might not work for everybody, whereas although this isn't going to impress anybody, you know, and get them absolutely raving, I do think there is nothing here to really offend anybody. It's fairly flat, it's stable, it's got enough squish to be comfortable, enough pop to be, you know, a little bit fun, but it's not doing anything crazy, which I think is going to rub anyone the wrong way. People will opt for those more exciting options over this one, better foams, bit of a kind of more punchy geometry, but there is a fair few people, non-zero, who will try this on and feel more secure, feel more comfortable. That maybe they want something for the gym and running around doing sport, bit more kind of general use, I would say. They don't really need a super strong rocker. Maybe they don't want a midfoot which collapses through, and I think that's where this can come in and do a pretty good job. For me, this has definitely been a shoe which I've been happy enough to use. It's not one that I'm dreading using like some shoes which just feel like a bit of a drag. I think this has got enough about it to feel comfortable in a modern daily training rotation. But I do think that if you're looking for that more fun experience, this might not have it. Maybe future versions of the Wave Rider will do something a little bit more radical. On the outsole here, we have a pretty decent coverage of sticky rubber, decent lug depth as well, quite a thick application. It is definitely a softer material though, so it doesn't make the ride feel too clumpy and stiff, and that is something that I'm pretty happy to see. I would personally happily trade off 100 Ks of durability if it means that I'm getting something which doesn't feel, you know, like a brick underfoot. So slightly softer rubber, maybe it's going to wear down a little bit quicker, but there's enough of it. I think the durability here should be decent enough, probably sitting around the average for a daily trainer. Certainly more than a Nova Blast or a Rebel in terms of the foam as well. Nitro EVA tends to last quite nicely. Maybe if you're a heavier guy, getting up into the forefoot, you could kill it off a bit quicker, but I do think overall this should be reasonably durable. In terms of the price point here in Australia, we're coming through with $250, which I think is maybe a little bit over. I reckon this would be much more comfortable at $230, sitting alongside the Rebel, Nova Blast, getting around the Evo SL. Obviously, it's not quite competing in the same space, but that's not really the point. The point is that in a retail space, everybody is asking for those shoes, and so if I'm going to bring this out alongside it, it'd make it a lot easier on my part if the shoe was priced the same, because sometimes people will actually prefer the feeling of this one, but then, you know, that $20, it actually does make a difference. It doesn't sound like a lot, but it does change people's mindset a whole lot, and they kind of start visualizing it as a completely different category when it could quite comfortably be brought out alongside it. So that's my take there. I reckon $230 for a daily trainer right now, which is fairly simple. It isn't doing anything crazy. You know, this is kind of like a Magnify Nitro 2, which has been out for a while. Skechers have had this technology for a little bit. It is nice for sure, and that's not a knock to Mizuno. It's nice to see them upgrading some of their more traditional models, but $250, I wouldn't mind seeing this brought down, making room for the Neo Zen as well. Like, it's not really representative of the performance to have this sitting up just below the Neo Zen when that is so radical and so fun. So $250, maybe a bit overs. This is probably one I would pick up on discount if I'm honest, but I reckon $230 could be a more comfortable recommended retail price. In terms of the comparisons here, couple to run through would be the Centauri 3 from 361 Degrees. Traditional geometry, nitrogen infused TPU foam, which is beaded. It's a little bit poppier, a little bit more energetic, but it does still have that nice kind of flat surface area on the ground. It's got a bit of heel cupping as well, a bit of sidewall, so it does feel quite stable. It's a fair bit lighter than this one. That's probably one of the key things I would say, is that this could be lighter. 288 for 38.5 mil of foam is not super light at all. So the Centauri 3 does feel a bit more versatile while having a bit of extra stability. I do think this has a slightly roomier fit, and it is a little bit easier to get your hands on, so that's an advantage there. Price point wise, I think the Centauri 3 sits around 270 full price, but it's often discounted down. Prices matched, I definitely go Centauri 3. But I think $20 difference, probably about right in terms of the difference in performance there. Nova Blast 5, people will ask, I didn't like the Nova Blast, I found it to be soft and mushy. This is a fair bit firmer, fair bit more structured through the heel and midfoot. I do think that you get a bit more road feel with the 10mm drop. I think that for me, the Nova Blast was a kind of soft jogger, whereas this does feel like something I can take past 40 to 60 minutes of running and still feel like I'm getting something back from the midsole. The fit, I would say, in terms of volume is quite close. I'd say this is maybe a little bit more dialed in, especially through the midfoot, whereas the Nova Blast is a fair bit roomier throughout. Magnify Nitro 3, may as well compare that. This is a fair bit softer. Both have a 10mm drop, but fair bit softer. And without the wave plate sitting through the heel, you do just get a whole lot more compression throughout the entire midsole. Piba foam, touch lighter, a little bit bouncier, I would say. At least in the early stages of the run, I did find that it went a little bit flat towards the kind of 60-minute mark, whereas the structure of the midsole here might get a few more people through, and the lockdown in the upper and the overall stability of the Wave Rider is definitely much better than the Magnify, so that would be a key advantage for the Mizuno. Mizuno Neo Cosmo is another good comparison. That's their $200 budget trainer, so $50 less than the Wave Rider. And I think the quality of foams is quite similar. They've got an EVA in there, which has a fair bit of geometry inspiration from the Neo Vista, that kind of nice smooth speed assist. It's snappy, it's smooth. It's got this really nice rebound to it, which I think is complemented by the fact that it is lower stacked, which is probably my preference, honestly. If I'm gonna get a 10mm drop, a little bit more of a kind of flexible, flat geometry underfoot, I may as well go a little bit lighter and a little bit lower to the ground and actually get a bit of proprioception, whereas I think that this is in that kind of weird in-between zone where it's got enough cushion to be protective, but it is maybe just that little bit off being kind of nimble and fun and snappy. So for me, I prefer the Cosmo, but I do think that is just an underrated shoe. I think the Wave Rider is more of that kind of stock standard daily, which has a bit more protection to it. Magnify Nitro 2 is probably another good comparison also. I think they feel very similar in terms of the tuning of the EVA foam here, that kind of more structured, smooth feeling to it. I do think the wave plate here makes a big difference. It does make the transition from heel to toe feel a little bit more abrupt. You do get a little bit more of a kind of quick switch from the heel density to the forefoot, whereas the Magnify was a bit smoother, a bit more buttery compressing through the entire midsole, whereas I think this is a little bit more controlled, a little bit more kind of regimented in the way that you land and take off. Overall for me, the Wave Rider 29 has been a decent shoe. It's certainly not the most exciting. I think a lot of you guys who are watching watch this channel because you want exciting dopamine addict shoes which are going to bounce you and pop you and roll you through every single stride at a lightweight, at a good price point. So this is probably not quite up your street, but there is going to be people out there who just want a simple, no fuss, safe running shoe underfoot. And I'm pretty happy to recommend that this one for that. It's been pretty good in store as well. So yeah, might not be up your street. I do still think shoes like this deserve to exist. I'll be interested to see what Mizuno do with this model moving forward. Do they continue to modernize it and make it more exciting? Or do they hold the line, keep the customers on board and continue to produce something which is just that little bit more safe? Good stuff here from Mizuno, modernizing a classic, keeping things safe. I think there is still a place for a shoe like this.